being mortgaged according to Kenya Kwanza, and the public participation, all the process in it, we don't really have fine details of that. So I just wanted to pick up your brains, Bill Okero. We wind up on it and go to other issues as well.
Dibala, I think we are not discussing the merits of this concessioning of the ports. The government has, had done this many times before. You remember, almost 10 years ago, there was a similar arrangement where the government, in fact, invited tenders from several countries, including Dubai, on Mombasa port, and for one reason or the other, Singapore was involved, and I think there was a Dutch company, I remember, and it didn't go far. But the issue is not about the merits. The issue is the way the government does things. It's about accountability. We have a government that has ceased to be accountable to people. It's about transparency, as mentioned by my colleagues. It's about the integrity of of these issues that the government does. And it's not only this. And let me tell you an example. In concession, we have not done very well. We take the SGR. To date, Kenyans do not know what are the terms of agreement relating to SGR. And you've seen its performance, and in terms of its returns and so forth. We concessioned a few years ago the only oil refinery we had to reliance of India, and the arrangement at the time was we were told they will put in hundreds of millions of dollars to revamp that thing. Nothing. Years later they fleeced it and it was shut down. We concessioned Kenya Railways to an Egyptian company, you remember, a few years ago. And nothing came out of it. It was asset stripping. I mean, so we have not been successful. When you have this stonewalling about what the government is doing on major issues like this, then then everyone has the right to be suspicious about the government's intent. And I think that is the concern in this case. That yes, the minister is not denying that there's something, but why do you have to do things without going through the due process and involve Kenyans so that we know what's going on, what are the benefits? Dubai World is a private entity. They're not going to, it's not a World Bank or IMF to give you free money, that you'll pay later. No, they're looking for profits. So what are the terms? What are we getting? Already this country is so highly indebted that Kenyans are living from hand to mouth. Where are our priorities? I mean, you want to take more, is it going to be how are they going to finance? Is it an equity participation? Is it a loan? Is it a further debt you're going to give? What exactly is going to be involved? We've spent huge amounts of money in revamping Mombasa port. Lamu alone, we spent over 42 billion just putting up those berths and trying to get it done for lapses. So Naivasha, you know how much we have spent, including the extension of the SGR. In Kisumu, we just spent billions in the last couple of years to try and get that port done. So when you get into a situation where you don't know what's going on, and you develop an entity, and then next year it is going to be concessioned out, and you don't know what are the terms of the concession, and a few years later you hear the deal. So I think it's about the accountability aspect of these things that Kenyans are concerned about. We have lost, there's trust deficit in government and in this government and on how we do things. I think that is the concern, and those are the issues that the government should, in my view, put on the table. Not the merits on whether everyone wants to see, you remember, Dubai, same Dubai port, more than 10-15 years ago, there were discussions about creating a free port in Mombasa. Today, the CS tells you, we want to turn Lamu port into the Dubai of Africa. Who tells you can do things, but you don't want to share? They have Kenya, KEPSA is there. There are institutions in this country, including the private sector and public. Why don't you discuss things openly? Where is the transparency? I think those are the concerns in this country. And from our history of the way things have been done, anyone would be worried about when you hear this kind of things.
Yeah, and, which is a good question to ask when we have also the chair of KEPSA Foundation. That is the foundation, but of course that is the private sector, so to speak. Engineer Patrick Obath, when it comes to such issues that are very pertinent and is going to affect businesses as well, you should be on the table, don't you think?
I think Bill Okero is right. When there's a major shift in the way the country is likely to operate, it's always good to get the key people who are likely to interact with that change to come in at the beginning and just listen to what they think. And going back to Tanjamed, that is exactly what happened. That's what they did. They said, we want a big port in Morocco. Where are you going to put it? How is it going to work? And so forth. And that discussion was had. People were brought in, and the whole country, government, private sector, civil society, whatever, were all aligned to that development. And before it even came to the open. And it takes me back to the days of, and I think Prof will remember this, the days of NESC, which you had in Kenya. NESC was a think tank. It was an organization that actually sat down and dreamt about where Kenya was going. And if you look at some of the output from there, or some of the big changes that are keeping Kenya where it is now. Vision 2030 came out of that. You look at some of, a lot of these big infrastructure developments were all thought through at that time. The whole issue of the digital change in Kenya all came from that particular area. But this was discussed quietly within a think tank that had, I think, about 20 or 30 people together. And you see where Kenya has gone. Those kind of organizations don't exist anymore. And I believe 100% what Bill said. We need to have this core thinking that gives us, even, it's not about the vision is there already, but even major investments, major things that are going to happen, there needs to be a participation of a limited number of people, but representing a wide range of people in the country. And that way, you will get buy-in as slowly as things come out. People already say, yes, it's been discussed, we've had this, Patrick Obath was involved, Bill Okero was involved, all these guys were involved, and yes, we think it is the right thing for the country. So I think timing is a thing, but also the method is another thing.
Method is another thing indeed. And in light of that,
just briefly, okay. There's an issue that is burning here. There is suspicion. Suspicion is the biggest thing. And country Kenya goes through a lot of corruption areas that have left basically untidy.
Don't you have a right to be suspicious?
Yes, so that is what is eating up.
We burnt our fingers before.
Yes, yeah? That's what I'm saying.
I'm suspicious of you.
I'm suspicious of Kenya.
Exactly. That is what is eating this whole process. The intentions may be very well-meaning, but suspicion around what are the corruption innuendos behind this whole thing. If it was tidied up, and that's what really your Korea attorney needs to do, tidy up this whole process so that it is presented in a very tidy. Remember, this is a public asset. These are public assets acquired or developed using public funds. And the government owes it to the public to make it very clear about what they are doing with these assets. There's nothing wrong with what we are doing. It's just the suspicion around who is behind it. And when
it's a process of that thing. And I'm happy as Simio, one of the key in their manifesto was to revive NESC. And Patrick is spot on. That's why you had the think tank, really, of this country. And you had people all the way from South Sudan, David Koh from Singapore, Lady Chok from the UK. And those things came and they gave the direction. And that was their advice. It doesn't mean it went, but they give that advice to the government in terms of that. And that's what Patrick is saying. And I think we need to be careful. The interpretation of public participation, it's not baraza, those kind of thing. But you get people who are objectively looking at that process. I think that's what needs to come out clearly. And I think what is coming, Bill was spot on. We are not against this efficiency, but it's a process of getting there.
Yes, and in the spirit of public-private participation, and that's it.
Correct.
But communication is what is wanting. From the ministry itself, from the government. Kenyans ought to know. We don't need to hear it from Kenya Kwanza, or there is this deal that is happening and we are not aware. So if but what is silly about public assets? Matters of security.
But I think we need to be more open, as you say, and have this.
That's what I'm saying. If we hear it now from a press conference coming from Kenya Kwanza, and we take it with a pinch of salt, we wonder, is it true or not, because of the environment and the season that we're in, which is fraught with politics. We can't really understand if there is any merit or demerit out of it. But let's just finalize on it. You've spoken?
Yeah. I was just going to follow on what Bill was saying. It's how do we get other people involved in this? Is there the idea of ideation, or the point where you are now issuing the RFP. And I think we are saying this is a good idea. It's not a bad idea to bring efficiencies within our critical assets, but the process of getting there, I think that's what we are looking at.
Thank you. All right, let's just wind up on that, because I want us now to focus on what is happening, especially with the maize, which has become a very hot potato issue, right? Maize is a hot potato issue right now because of the prices that is ongoing. And millers have intimated plans by Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Peter Munya to suspend all levies imposed on imported maize in pursuit of lower cost of the staple. That it will only cut the price of the flour by 2 shillings for a 2-packet. Now, United Grain Millers Association, that is UGMA, an umbrella body of small and medium millers, say the move is so insignificant that it will not have any impact on consumers. The government will gazette a directive by end of today to suspend the levies imposed on imported maize in a bid to lower the cost of maize flour that is now retailing at 210 for a 220, 210, so the prices are variegated according to panelists. For a 2-packet, imported maize is levied at 100 shillings for 90 kgs or 90 kgs bag, with a single bag giving 36 packets of 2 kilos when milled, meaning that suspending the levies will only cut the cost by 2 shillings and 7 cents. And the government, through different agencies, charges levies that comprise the certificate of conformity fee levied by the Kenya Bureau of Standards. So let's just hear briefly, maybe from the CS himself, and this is a story that was done by our own Brenda Kirubo, just to give us a perspective of where we are at. And we have now Unga Millers Association saying, no, this will not make any difference at the end of the day. Kenyans were really, very happy and sanguine that at least the government has intervened. Let's just hear that story.
After months of rising food prices, some sigh of relief could just be kicking in a month to the country's elections. In the government's latest move to clamp down on high maize flour prices, the government has lifted the waiver on duties and charges on imported maize.
The measure is intended to reduce the costs of maize that is coming to the country, and therefore impact on the price of maize and unga that is increasing in our retailing points across the country.
The intervention is expected to ease the burden on Kenyans who have been paying dearly for a packet of maize flour, even as the cost of living has continued to escalate. Last month, National Treasury CS Ukuri Yatani okayed the importation of up to 540,000 metric tons of white maize from outside the East African community. Millers gave this a wide berth, citing logistical constraints that would see the maize arrive just at the peak when the country would be harvesting. The move comes as over 70% of maize millers in Nakuru closed shop due to an acute shortage of maize. Millers are warning consumers to brace for harsh times ahead due to the current shortage, which could see the prices hit 250 shillings per 2 kilogram packet.
Mahindi inakosekana ni kwa sababu mbegu zimekuwa juu, mashamba imefinyika, fertilizer imeenda juu sana. Kwa hivyo hata wakilima acreage moja ukitarajia mtu atoe gunia 20, anatoa gunia 3, gunia 4. Kwa hivyo ile kiwango walikuwa natarajia haiwezi patikana. Na hiyo mahindi ndio sisi tulikuwa tunatarajia.
Beleni ilikuwa kama gunia 15 kwa siku. Lakini sasa hata moja saa nyingine ukosa. Na ukipata hiyo moja ndio sasa unajaribu kugawana na watu.
Millers hao ndio walikuwa wanatusaidia kupata uga ya bei kidogo, na sasa imefungwa. Sasa tunaomba tu government wajue venye watafanya, at least hii economy irudi chini.
Sasa hizi mapato ziko juu, kila kitu imepanda, so mapato yetu sisi wananchi wa kawaida ni chini.
A ton of imported maize was costing 28,260 shillings last year. a rise from 27,279 in the previous year, and was the highest since 2017 when it was 30,321 shillings.
We are also asking those who are holding maize, because we know there are people and individuals holding maize. When this cheap maize comes, don't complain. Don't complain, because they'll start complaining that their prices have gone down. Because you are holding maize and putting the country at ransom, and we have evidence. We do standards and stock taking, and we know there is maize, some maize there. I'm not saying it is enough, but there could be maize out there.
Kenya National Bureau of Statistics data shows maize production in the country declined by 12.8% from 42.1 million bags in 2020 to 36.7 million bags last year on the back of erratic rains. Brenda Kirubo, KTN News.
Many thanks indeed, Brenda. And let's center on that as well, with the Association of Millers now decrying that this particular move by the government does not move that particular needle even a jot. It will only go down by 2 shillings. I want to pick the brains of James Mreo on this as well, because now you sit also in the National Cereals Board. I want to talk Siri.
He does?
Yeah. Unaona pia hukujua.
Okay. I just usually to prove here that I hope this doesn't come up. But the truth be told, yes, I do sit in the National Cereals and Produce Board. And yes, the truth is the country has a problem.
It has a problem.
Yes. And I think it's good if we face the problem head on. Now, I'm a firm believer that planning can sort out a lot of things. And whether it is the Bible that says you save for a rainy day, or whether it's a common saying that make hay while the sun shines, we must always remember that seasons come, seasons go. There is a time when we have plenty, there's a time when we have scarcity. And the last few years, we've seen vagaries of bad weather affect, whether it's a heavy rains or the drought that the country has experienced. And it is at times such as this that a planning institution such as the one that we are in, the National Cereals and Produce Board, should be well facilitated to make sure that we stockpile enough maize and enough food to assure this country of food security. And I know I risk talking too much about what really is not in the public domain, but the truth is, and it's good to just be blatantly truthful about this, is we need either those people who are hoarding maize, as the minister has said, must be forced to release that maize, or must not be allowed them to sell that maize into the market if that is the case. But suffice it to say that we have a shortage of maize. Now, what good governance tells me is we should not have stockpiled while other countries were experiencing bumper harvests. That is when the government should have been busy stockpiling. We have waited until this last moment, and true to what you have just read, the price of unga is becoming unaffordable, completely unaffordable. And this is just because we have not planned. Poor planning produces poor product. We have to plan. Food security is one of the big responsibilities of any responsible government, to assure its citizenry that there will be at least enough food.
I suppose that's why you are that's why in the board of National Cereals Board.
For your planning,
Prof,
strategic. It is strategic. Great reserve. A strategic.
Yes,
what's the strategy?
We are a strategic food reserve, but I don't want to speak in the public domain here about issues that we have experienced. But what I have said should be enough. That we need to plan ahead. We need to have resources to be able to stockpile and build reserves when there is plenty, so that when there is shortage, we are able to call on our. Whether we have those food reserve is what I'm asking the country to just let me rest there. Let me rest there. I don't want to go beyond there, because beyond there, then I'll be speaking outside.
You will not be talking like a board member.
Yes. We do have challenges. We do have challenges. And those challenges can only be dealt with at government level.
At government level?
Yes, yes, yes.
So you do want to pinpoint some of the challenges that...
It is just resources, really. If you have enough resources to be able to procure when the whole country is having excess, we stockpile.
Now, you've had issues of stockpile and storage capacity as well.
No, we don't have a problem with storage capacity. It is resources to buy when Gituru has excess maize, we buy and keep. When Prof has excess, we buy and keep. We have a food security. That is the basic thing that even birds, even ants.
Let's hear from, I know Os is a prolific farmer as well, Dominic Mwenja, with the hydroponics as well. I think he's...
even urban areas.
In the urban areas.
Urban areas. Let me just echo what the chairman has just said. It's about planning. The whole ecosystem about maize production. And I think the other conversation we had during the UNDP, the other conference, I was sharing a podium with Prof here, is the issue of planning. How do we, and maize, let me tell you, two things. Maize and oil should be part of our national security issues.
Yes.
And there is no question about that. It's the issue of planning around the ecosystem of maize production. One, we know climatic conditions have affected our maize production in this country. Two, the issue of fertilizers and the availability of fertilizers. Three, also the diversification of the plate. The over-reliance on maize, and I think, Prof, we had that discussion.
Correct.
We diversify our plate, where we encourage our people also to eat rice and other staples that will release mihogos, that will release the pressure on the maize production. Number three, seeds. We have to be able to get seeds that are climate resilient, which means we have to involve the science, the technology of maize production, and we can borrow this from many countries that are self-sufficient in maize production. The other thing is the issue of having strategic reserves, both for oil and our food, staple food, which is maize. And if there are indeed people who are hoarding, as the minister is saying, that's a national security issue, and such people should be prosecuted.
Go for them.
That's sabotage.
They should be, that's a sabotage of the economic sabotage, which affects on our national security. And therefore, if we were to get these two products, maize and oil, as part of a national security ecosystem, some of these problems will not be having. Planning is issue, and I'll tell you, the issue we're having in CBC right now, I was part of the committee in National Committee in 2016 that was appointed by Matiang'i. And I pointed out the issue of middle schools in 2016. That's 6 years later. We still have not figured out the issue of middle schools and where middle schools will be residing, whether it's in primary school, whether in secondary school, and all that. The issue was also the issue of resources. How much was it going to cost to build those classrooms, either in primary school or secondary schools? So when we resource our different sectors properly, I think, and with proper planning, some of the issues that we face, we should not be facing them.
Indeed. Right. Professor Gituru, what I know.
Yeah, let me start from the point of, I'm not a believer in resources, that the resources are scarce. It's probably what do we want to do. Appropriation. And you get opportunities for people to support you in terms of that. I think my friend Ndungu has need to have a stint in government and get some language in government. You know, when he says the country has a problem, I could have said the same. There are challenges as far as maize is concerned.
That's what I said.
The opening statement, there was a problem in the country. So, and we need to be a bit careful we don't become alarmist in terms of what.
No, but that's the reality of the ground. Why sugarcoat it in challenges? It's just a matter of semantics. You get the same point, don't you?
Why is innate?
But that is the truth.
And we have shared here. Let me pick from what Dominic is saying, that the narrative of the food on the plate has to change. Our children are really not in those areas. And we have said, this cup with maize meal can't even feed me, but it can feed about 4 of us, with muchere. So something we need to. But what is fundamental here is, as we look into maize, and I totally agree there is maize, and even when you go to fuel, you ring-fence something like diesel. Not everything. Ring-fence maize. Is you can't provide subsidy at the retail level. No. it will never work. Because the production is very expensive. So you go and look at the production level, and that's where the inputs come in. That's where the whole supply chain comes in. Now, the fundamental question you need to ask ourselves, we are not the only one who are facing the drought. You look at countries like Uganda, Tanzania, they have no issues in terms of maize production.
Yes.
And you go to Tanzania, maize is also one of the staple food. So I think we need to step back. SGR gradually, right? Strategic grain reserves. That's one of the key of your responsibilities, really. But I think I hear you. I have a friend who actually shared with me last, when was it? I think Saturday. And he come from Wasenegishu. And you have a stock of a maize plant. You can get 4
Yes.
go.
Yes.
But he has stopped. The reason why is the returns. So he's better off planting avocados and then buy the maize. And I think that's something we need to address, because if you look at certain areas, production areas, an avocado is great, but you're doing more for export. You can't have a meal called avocado. No, it's not possible. The same thing, the flower farms, the French beans. So there's also something beyond what you're looking here. How do you look those areas and protect in terms of what you can plant? And we have said this in this forum before. To me, Kitare really can produce maize for everybody in this country.
And Narok.
And Narok. Then we really distribute the supply chain to other parts of the world. I've said, if you go to Keroke or Muranga, what are you doing with a quarter of an acre applying maize? You have no business. You apply avocados. So there's something we need to look at the production level as opposed to the... And therefore, if you look at what I was talking about, the cooking gas, they're really reducing from 16 to 8%. Those are the margins we are looking at. How can we reduce the margin? If you actually to do it right now at the retail level, my feeling is the house is on fire. So you don't start asking who burned the house. First put the house on the fire down, then ask who.
Thank you.
As far as maize is concerned.
All right, thank you. Engineer Patrick Obath.
I'll go with, where does this country want to focus its attention? We have maize all of a sudden happening, you have wheat all of a sudden happening, you have all these things happening in terms of the average bread basket in Kenya. We go back to how frequently we shoot ourselves in the foot and look at the Galu project that was supposed to be the answer to this whole thing. That thing has had a stillbirth. And what people are now looking at is growing fodder for cattle, yeah, in the same place. We need to be serious as a country around looking at massive production of the core things that will affect this country. So if we get a Galu and really take 100,000 hectares or whatever the number was and invest properly, not inviting Patrick Obath and so to come and take 100 acres each. No. We go on a public-private partnership or even just a full 100% commercial deal and get an organization that understands how to do that and do it well and tell them, here's 100,000 hectares, we want you to manage this particular area, and then hands off. All you're looking at is output. The cost of output is all you give them. And you say, we want maize to come out of this place at this price. And if they're good enough, they'll work it out and they'll invest and they'll make their money. But we don't tell them, we want you to bring maize out at that cost, but at the same time, we want you to do it in this particular manner, which is where we fail miserably as a country. We don't want just the output, we want to control how it happens. And by doing that, corruption comes in, people begin to sort of try and make their cut, and then the output is almost impossible to achieve. The second thing, and this is addressed to Mureo, who is the chairman of the cereals board, and this is a commodity. Maize, wheat, doesn't matter what it is, even oil, which is my world. All those are commodities. It is no longer fashionable to have what you call strategic reserves run by an organization in a country. The world is moving to a stage whereby you get a global trader to put a trading facility in your country. So, for example, if we take oil, we get Vitol, we get, Epimola, or these big companies that trade globally, and say, why don't you come and put a trading facility in Kenya where you will put so many millions of liters of fuel in Kenya, and you trade, and all those tanks will be full all the time. And in the meantime, that becomes a strategic reserve, so we always have the first call on it in the event things go wrong, and you pay a small premium for it. So you don't actually invest, you just facilitate. And once you've done that, then as, say, the cereals board, your job is to actually ensure that what they've said is in those tanks or in those silos are present. And you don't have to invest a penny. But anytime there's a crisis, you are able to pull out of that at an agreed price. I think we need to start thinking smartly about how we are going to manage these issues. The arable land in Kenya, as was quite rightly said, is being chopped down into what I call inheritance units. An acre is chopped down to half an acre each if there's two people to inherit, and then into a quarter of an acre, and it gets down to a completely non-manageable, non-productive size. And we need to start changing people's thinking, or move away and go away from those areas and go to areas like Garissa, go to Moyale and all the rest of it, and start farming in that area using methods that, for example, you can get from Israel. Yeah, and you just have large tracts of land, get into the right agreements with the communities there, and start producing. We need to change our thinking drastically in terms of how we manage our food basket in the country, Dibal.
Many thanks indeed. And I'm just looking at this copy of The Economist I just whipped up there. This was the May issue. The coming food catastrophe. This is looming. And if you look keenly also on this graphics, what can you see? This is meant to be, you can see scars there. And right now we're suffering from, on the wheat. This is just a bellwether, and according to The Economist, this is what the world is experiencing right now with the global warming. The question that will come also to Bill Okero is, the Gulana Kulalu will have solved this issue right now. We wouldn't be talking about maize flour and cost of maize flour right now if government had their ducks in a row as far as maize flour is concerned, with that particular project that was fraught with so much, controversy and corruption. And even the Israeli government, they're on record saying we've never failed as far as projects are concerned in the world, save in Kenya. Nothing really works at the end of the day, and of course they bolted. And even when we had the previous Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, coming to the country, he visited everywhere, save for Galana Kulalu. And we wonder why. This was a project of an Israeli. He should have been the first person to come and see how is it really faring. I just want you to comment on that, because we shouldn't be talking about this. This is a pure dysfunction of the government, and they're the people who are failing Kenyans at the end of the day.
Yes, Divala, I don't think there's anyone else who fails Kenyans other than government, isn't it? Obviously, it's the government. But look at it from a larger picture. When this administration came in 10 years ago, food security was the main thing that they promised they will handle. And for the last 10 years, on average, the Ministry of Agriculture has received allocations far in excess of 50 billion. You're talking of over 500 billion shillings. Given to this ministry in 10 years. We have an economy, a government that has an expenditure annually in excess of $30 billion. And you cannot get things right, not just on food, maize. I mean, it's literally across the board in all the areas of food, water, and I mean, in many areas. So I think the challenge we've mentioned earlier, the government, isn't dysfunctional in terms of in managing. They can't, and we've been doing the same thing, and we expect different results for the last 10 years with regards to this issue of food security and maize in particular. So Galana is the same thing. There's no difference. I mean, you could talk of another project in terms of, you remember Turkana, they talked of, we are going to put at the beginning of 2013, they talked of putting 1 million, 2 million acres, in Turkana and irrigation and food, but nothing comes out of of this planning by the government. And I think, frankly, we are in a situation where the challenge we have is a government that says they have to do all the thinking for the people of Kenya. And that does not want to consult, that does not want to, that has no inclusive policies. And so you have, the CS knows everything, the PS knows everything. No one else knows in this country about how to run things. So we don't go anywhere. And so they promised 10 years ago that the price of fertilizer is going to be 1/3 of what it is. The cost of freight is going to be reduced from 130 to 30,000. Everything is a pledge. Today we are going through the same. We are going for an election. You're already being told who's going to be there when elections are over. You don't expect miracles to happen because the same people who are running are going to run this government again. So it's an unfortunate situation we are in. And I think for me the issue is the government must really learn to listen to the people. The government must get used to involving other sectors of the economy in their planning. And it's not, so that you don't just wake up and say, this is my legacy, I want to do X, Y, Z. And you do it and nothing comes out of it. And Kenyans are back to where they were. So I think we need to change the way we are doing things. And unfortunately, each of us, I think, who are in this position where we are, need to tell the leaders that it's time this country's leaders learn to listen to people and really try and get things done. Because maize, if you just sit with the millers and the major producers of maize and discuss with them on how to enhance production in this country of maize, you will find solutions. But nobody wants to get into that. Government will wait. Despite being given advance warning, and let me tell you, in this country we have very critical institutions, UNEP and ICRAF and many other environment-related institutions, and they have warned, and this I am a party to it, more than 7-8 years ago, that East Africa is going to face serious challenges in terms of food security because of the weather patterns. And they give you information 2 or 3 years in advance that you can use as government to plan. And regrettably, it's not being used. And even where we spend our money, by the way, it's not about the food security. We give money to coffee, we give money to tea, we're talking of avocados and all those. Those are the places where you invest money. How much money is invested in Kwale to enhance production of maize? How much are you putting in those areas around Narok? Look at the numbers every year. It's so because we are elitist, even in terms of resource allocation, in terms of our priorities, they are misplaced. And so then, then at the end of the day, you cannot just wake up and tell Kenyans, can you change your diet? Go from maize and go into this. It's not something that, can just, you can't just tell them to do that. I think the important thing is, for me, the fundamental thing is the government needs to listen to people. The government needs to involve really stakeholders in their planning. And the government needs to focus really beyond, annual budgets to medium term, long term, to try and address some of the challenges that we face, in particular in food security, which has been their #1 agenda, and even now it's still the #1 agenda in their big four the last couple of years, but still it has remained elusive.
Right. I can see Professor Gituro Wanena is turning at the list to say something. Yeah,
I wanted to ask, get experience from Bill, that he was in the parliament, and in the constitution is very clear that you cannot subdivide the land to a certain level. Why it has taken, I don't know how many, 3 of them to pass that law? Because very clear, you cannot subdivide your land to a certain level. I think it's 5 acres or so. Why has Parliament not done it? And it's there in the Constitution.
Why has Parliament not done in what? In terms of the legislation is in the Constitution?
There are certain areas in this country where you even get an eighth of an acre or half. The Constitution is very clear. The lowest level you can go is some subdivision of that piece of land, even for commercial. Why has Parliament not passed this law? His experience, he was there.
But if it's in the Constitution, why do we need to pass the law?
You have to unpack,
maybe I don't follow.
You have to unpack the Constitution is not the law. You have to unpack the Constitution and make it operational.
It's actually more of operationalization than creating new laws.
But that has got nothing to do with Parliament.
But let me
actually look at Section 8.
Okay, let me just, I'm not the parliamentarian. Maybe Bilo will be in a better place to answer that. Bilo.
Well, I think that the issue is that clause, of course, the Constitution, also talks about idle land, and so the issue is when the principle has been captured in the Constitution, where Parliament needs to enact relevant legislation to give effect to some of those provisions in the Constitution. But let me tell you, the issues of land are so delicate that because of political expediency and many other factors, it's not been possible, I think, for the government to produce a legislation in restricting, for example, giving effect to those issues of idle land and of subdivision of land and so forth. So I think that has been the challenge. Maybe even as a private member, one would be able to bring legislation, but again, I think the issue of land, many people would, from a political aspect of it, is a bit tricky, and nobody wants to go to that area. But it has worked in many countries. You go to Rwanda, I mean, you can't subdivide land into quarter acres, and you put everything. This is, the child is born, you again have to subdivide. I think it's important. I agree that is a critical, and particularly in the food basket areas, we need to preserve land, and the areas that have been mentioned, like in Western and in Rift Valley parts of the country where they are critical, it's important. But I don't think it's been possible to pass that legislation because of, it's a hot potato and nobody wants to perhaps get into it.
No one wants to get banned. Bureo.
Yeah, I know this is a hot potato, but I want to say this. There is an issue that has been raised about Galana Kulalu.
Yes.
The land. That land, I'll tell you, Debal, and this is public domain. The land was allocated to the wrong people. It was not allocated to farmers. The first time when that land was subdivided or allocated, a lot of briefcase operators got allocated that land. And that is how we lost the purpose for which the government had set it aside. In other words, people went in the usual Kenyan style and got themselves letters of allotment. Not farming. They wanted now to get the land and look for a potential partner who can do that. And that is where we flopped. If government really wanted to deal with that land, then they should have commercialized the whole land. And unfortunately, and I say this without any fear of contradiction, that Israelis being given that land to farm was probably the wrong thing. Because Israelis are good in intensive farming, not extensive farming, large-scale farming. The land that 1 million acres is probably the entire land that Israel occupies. So what we should have looked for are commercial farmers like from Netherlands, from Australia, from the US, who are familiar with large-scale farming, that would have then had mechanization and the machines put in there. And like I think it's Professor who said, let us not be interested in the nitty-gritties or the politics, let us be interested in production from that 1 million acres. But unfortunately, in our usual style, we politicized that land, and only those who knew the then minister, who is going to be unnamed, of agriculture, got allocated that land. Unfortunately, this is where we've ended up. But again, planning, as everybody has stressed, is everything. We know that we have been warned about bad weather. We have been warned about global warming. We have been warned about excessive rain, El Nino and El Nino coming. We plan ahead. Now, at times we have food shortage caused by drought, and at times we have food shortage caused by excessive rain. Either way, we should plan. So planning is everything.
If planning is everything.
Yes, even the birds and the ants plan for rainy days.
Yeah.
Why not?
Even the good book says we should learn from the ants.
Yes.
Maybe they need a copy. Even from the Ceros board, you need a copy of the Bible. From the book of Proverbs. Yes, yeah. Learn from the ants. Yeah, they have no king. Yet they are well planned out. They know the harvest season and the because the drought.
I'll not comment.
I'm getting concerned. His understanding of the Bible. We have to have it here and read it.
But I've said we do have challenges, as have been rightly guided by Professor Gituro.
Yeah,
we have challenges. They are not insurmountable. I think it's a question of us putting our priorities right and plan properly. And we are bound to get the right results. and stop concretizing all our arable land, because the production of the product that comes out of that land is not enough to feed the farmer. They have decided to turn Kiambu, which is the most arable land, into a concrete jungle, hence further endangering the country into this food.
Let me just read that verse. Yeah. Then I give. And I know you. Some of you hit the road. Yeah, you have to hit the road. Yeah. But this is what the good book says. Yeah. No. Let's just say I'm misquoting.
Go ahead.
You know, it says, this is Proverbs 6:6. But director may just pick
Proverbs
it up.
6.
Yeah, it says, go to the ants, you sluggard. Let me try and expound on it. It's eluding me. But director may just pick us so that we can. It says, go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Right? To teach us of the laziness in our lives, God points us to the unlikely teaching. Yeah, go to the ant. And then he says, I think this is not the one that I really wanted. Here it is. Yeah, provide her supplies in summer and gather her food in the harvest. Yeah, provides her supplies in the summers, in the summer, and gathers her food in
at harvest.
You metosha too.
Yes.
I've
read it.
Yeah, you've read it.
Yes, it's
metosha. So we can even ask the Bible Society of Kenya to supply you with Bibles at the National Cereals Board, so that will be your running. That will be, yes.
I've got one.
You've got one. Maybe when you have the hard copies, when you can actually.
But Debal, it is the country.
Thank you.
Its planning is not just about the cereals; it's about everything else, as somebody said, because the factors of production are many and varied, including fuel.
Right. Let's hear from Prof. Dominic Mwenje.
Yeah, I think for me, I'll look at this from 2 points. First of all, we need to know who killed Gulalu. Okay, the names need to come out. We need to know who was actually part of that, because this is where. And remember, last time when we talked about corruption, it is such an amorphous construct that people don't understand what it is. So when we break it down to 3 things: extortion, theft, and bribery. When you allocate yourself land because you have prior knowledge that certain project is coming, and you multiply the cost of that land by 1,000%, that's extortion. So when the Israelis come and they're trying to get this land that was supposed to cost maybe 20,000 shillings, but then it's 200,000 shillings, then it becomes awfully expensive. So those are things that we need to address. We address planning, the issue of fighting corruption and all that. So somehow we'll need to know who killed Galana Gulalo. Let me go back. If we look at the Nation, page 4, it says more than half of northern Kenya residents food poor, shows a report. Now, then you come to Kiambu and other places where we have good Arab land, but they have so much pressure from settlements and concretization of the land itself. It calls for us now to balance 2 things: the available land, wherever you are, using the latest science and technology in farming, so that the small pieces of land, we have maximum productivity for that piece of land. Then for the larger parts of the northeastern part of this country that is drier, then we look for food systems that will actually be able to be resilient enough for those regions. So it goes back to planning. How do we look at the entire ecosystem of food production for whichever area that we are? Then we use the available science and technology to make sure we grow food anywhere, any place, regardless of land or the weather conditions. So it's a matter of planning and deliberately building that ecosystem.
Thank you. Let me cross over. It's your turn, Prof. Yes. Briefly, we wind up on it. I don't want Patrick Obath to run away because I know also he has a meeting, because there's the issue of the fuel shortage, and now that we have the National Oil Corporation also will be importing crude oil from Saudi Arabia to try and stem the situation in the country as well. Briefly,
what you're talking here is it's really serious thing we need to consider, even when you actually see the manifesto coming today. And we saw the one from Azimio, and I think the issue of food becomes an issue completely. And my take here is, I wish we could, whoever comes in, let's address the issue of prices or.
It's a big issue.
It's a big issue. The issue of drought, and I think Mulevi is spot on. We know the patterns. We can even project. We know the production and the population by 2040, the gap is widening. How do we plan for that? I think is important. And of course, the public debt. That's something really need to. I'm hoping the manifesto can look in this. a good idea bottom up. But much important, and I think I haven't seen from both parties, Vision 2030 is coming to an end by 2030. What's our long view of this country? And that long view must address the issue of food security, which is very important. But what are the issue of production and the issue of service delivery, the digitization.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
I have to hit the road.
You have to hit the road. Can you just indulge me with some 2 minutes on Patrick Obath on the other side of a break when we wind up on it? So that, If you don't mind,
together he can tell me what he found in Mexico and all those areas.
Allow me just to take a short break. But even as we're taking that short break, I just wanted to capture what maybe I should circle back with that so that we can wind up with that particular article. Let's take that break.